Hello and welcome to Projector, and on this episode, Ryan Gosling makes a friend in space as they try to save the universe together in the film adaptation of Project Hail Mary. Ryland Grace, played by Ryan Gosling, wakes from a coma with amnesia aboard a spaceship, and his two other crewmates have died in transit. As his memory gradually returns, Grace starts to piece together why he's there. A microorganism known as astrophage is making the Earth's sun dim, causing an extinction-level event in 30 years' time. Grace was hired by Eva Stratt, played by Sandra Hüller, as part of Project Hail Mary, a last-chance attempt to save Earth, and the ship is on course to Tau Ceti, the only star in the universe that is not infected, to figure out why. But Grace soon realises that he's not alone in this mission after all. It was inevitable that Project Hail Mary would make its way to the screen, especially given how successful Andy Weir's previous book The Martian was, where it was brought to film by Ridley Scott back in 2015. Ryan Gosling and MGM bought the rights to the book before it was even published back in 2020, with the idea that Gosling would star in it and try to repeat that earlier success. And when the book came out the following year, it was a huge smash that garnered rave reviews. Also back from The Martian is Cloverfield writer Drew Goddard, who did the script for that movie, and he returns to do the adaptation here. Piloting the ship this time is Phil Lord and Christopher Miller, the directors of the Lego Movie, and I do have to admit, I was a bit dumbfounded when I was researching this, as I learned this is their first directing credit since 22 Jump Street back in 2014, which is nuts, right? Because Lord and Miller have never gone away, and they're exceptionally prolific as producers, being especially hands-on with the universally acclaimed Spider-Verse films, so much so that we do have a tendency to think of them before the actual directors of those films. Of course, we know the big reason why there is this massive gap in their careers. They were fired from the Star Wars prequel Solo midway through the shoot, with most of it being reshot by credited director Ron Howard. It was all very public and acrimonious, and certainly there was a lot of questions at the time over whether the duo, who had mostly worked in animation, were simply not able to handle the complexities of a big blockbuster sci-fi movie, as their previous live-action directing credits were the Jump Street movies. Or maybe they were just too idiosyncratic for a major franchise like Star Wars, and they just weren't the right fit. But if there were any lingering questions about their ability to helm an ambitious big-budget sci-fi flick, then Project Hail Mary can finally put them to bed. This is a fantastically directed film with all the playfulness, creativity and emotional heart that we've come to expect from Lord and Miller's work intact, and an absolutely roaring success as an adaptation. And it is obviously very much in the same vein as The Martian, especially since they have the same premise of an astronaut alone in space, and just like that movie, it's anchored by a hugely charismatic central performance that carries the entire film. I'll just come out and say it, I've been a huge fan of Ryan Gosling for many years, going all the way back to things like Drive. He's a fantastic actor that's immensely watchable, and this is the absolute testament to that, because Gosling is not just in every single scene of this film, but there are large chunks of this where he's effectively acting by himself or to a puppet. It's perhaps an even more demanding role for Gosling than it was for Matt Damon, because while Damon spent almost that entire film on his lonesome, it was an ensemble piece that split its time between him and the other characters back on Earth. This movie is entirely from Grace's point of view, even the way the narrative is framed, so we experience it as he does. And Gosling has developed a quite self-effacing screen persona in recent years, in contrast to some of his earlier, more brooding performances. There's a lot of humour in his acting, and that's especially true here, particularly in the film's earlier scenes where he's fumbling around, disorientated and uncoordinated, with wild long hair and a big bushy beard, raving like a madman. Even after that, he's still clumsily tripping up around the ship, and particularly struggles at first with trying to control his actions in zero gravity, flailing as he floats around cluelessly. seamlessly. It's a very physically demanding performance by Gosling, especially with all the complexities of having so much wire work, and yet he manages to make it look effortless because he's got such good comic timing. Likewise, I'm sure that Lord and Miller's famously improvisational approach also clicked with Gosling, particularly in the recorded video diaries where he has a number of funny lines, although he wears t-shirts almost exclusively consisting of science puns. But Gosling also sells the big emotional beats of the film too, and the devastating sense of loneliness that his character feels. Sometimes, even within the same scene, you'll go from laughing to being genuinely moved, and there are points in this where Gosling is achingly vulnerable. One scene in particular, 2/3 of the way through, where Grace gets some life-changing news, might be some of the best acting that Gosling has ever done. It's an incredibly likeable performance, and like Damon before him, he becomes a convincing everyman for the audience to project themselves onto. And this speaks to the appeal of Andy Weir's writing, because his stories might be flights of fancy, but he tries to ground them in plausible science. Weir is doing hard sci-fi, but in an approachable way that mixes it with pulpy genre tropes. We relate to his characters because while they are exceptionally smart, their methods are often trial and error, trying to find solutions using limited resources. We feel like we're trying to solve the problem alongside them, and that's how Weir gets us engaged with the science, by making it fun and exciting in its own right, because it can lead to surprising and unexpected outcomes. When they make a discovery, we share that same catharsis with them, because there's something immensely satisfying about seeing someone science the shit out of this, as Matt Damon famously said. If I did have a little nitpick with Project Hail Mary, I do think at times that it can rush through the actual explanations of how Grace accomplishes what he does, but I understand that's a trade-off that you have to make for a film. In a book, you've got room to deep dive into that, but a film has to prioritise pace, especially when there's a lot of ground to cover like there is here, and that still barely fits within the realm of 2.5 hours. It's not important to fully understand the specifics of how Grace manages to do something, only the sense that he does. But if that sounds a bit like the investigative elements of a whodunit, then that's very deliberate, because it's meant to be a mystery where we have just as many questions as Grace. What happened that he's now on a spaceship? Why is he there? What is astrophage, and why is the sun dying? Why is Tau Ceti the only star that's intact? These are the sort of questions that Grace tries to ask in a room full of people trying to catch him up on everything, and they have to just keep chanting back, "We don't know." And gradually over the course of it, we get most of the answers. But for Grace at first, to paraphrase David Byrne, you may find yourself behind the wheel of a large spaceship, and you may ask yourself, well, how did I get here? So the film plays out in two parallel timelines, with Grace in space on the Hail Mary, and Grace on Earth leading up to the mission, which are his memories slowly returning to him. These are in two different aspect ratios, so the scenes in space are opened up to 2:1 in the regular version, or even further to 1:3, depending on the IMAX print you see, and the scenes on Earth are in 2:35 scope. So you have two very distinct looks for different sections of the movie. It's in these Earth scenes that we meet Eva Stratt, played by Sandra Hüller, who drew a lot of deserved attention for a fantastic turn in Anatomy of a Fall, who hires Grace on the back of an old paper that he wrote. Stratt is quite pragmatic and even seems quite cold at times. There's an early moment where Grace humorously asks if he's expendable, and she has to confer with a room of people to confirm that they would prefer if you didn't die. But she has to be hard and tough for the sake of the mission, which is her utmost priority. But it's based in an idealism, and there is a caring warmth to her, as much as she tries to hide it, and she's always supportive of Grace. Hüller gets a standout bit in a karaoke scene where she belts out Harry Styles' Sigh of the Times, which is apparently a late addition to the film that Gosling insisted upon once he heard her singing voice. It was absolutely the right choice. It's a beautiful moment that sums up the whole character perfectly, even down to the song choice that's quite poetic if you know what the song is supposed to be about. Hüller excels at playing these complex characters, and she's excellent playing a pivotal supporting role. And in a way, she's sort of the core of the story as a whole. When you think about it, the stakes of the story are exceptionally bleak, as all life will become extinct, and what's left of humanity that doesn't initially perish will be plunged into freezing temperatures and fighting over what food and resources are left. Even at the start of the film, Grace is teaching a class who will be the generation that grows up through this threat, and they're all terrified that they're going to die, and he assures them that the best and brightest are looking for a solution, unaware that he will become a part of it. This is pretty clearly an allegory for the looming threat of climate change, with astrophage being a textbook MacGuffin that serves the needs of the story. It's both an existential threat, but also a remarkable, if dangerously unstable energy resource that serves as part of the solution to its own problem, as it's the fuel that allows the Hail Mary to make its journey. It gets even darker, as that's a one-way journey, as that's only the amount of fuel there is, so Grace has to try and accept the fact that not only is he alone in space, but he will die there too, having to sacrifice himself for the sake of humanity. But this is a triumphantly optimistic story about the resolve of the human spirit, ingenuity, and survival when all hope appears to be lost. One that does have some echoes of something like Interstellar. Grace's biggest problem is mostly himself and his lack of self-belief. He's become a middle school science teacher after his theories were derided, and he's accepted that that just is his place. And every single step of the way, Grace keeps telling Strat that he's not the man that they're looking for, memorably exclaiming, "I put the not in astronaut!" But she can see his potential even if he doesn't. And for all his doubts and cowardice, when he's pressed, he's more than smart enough to fend for himself. He struggles to work out how to pilot the ship given he had no training for it, but he does eventually master it. He can do it, he's just more scared to accept that he is able to do it and have that responsibility. Grace's capability and courage surprises even himself, and the film is all about embracing the possibility of hope and accomplishing something beyond not just what you thought possible of yourself, but against such impossible odds that it's almost miraculous. But perhaps the most miraculous thing in the film is the central friendship that develops between Grace and the rock-like alien that he calls Rocky. And yes, this being an MGM film, he can show him the movie of his namesake. In the original book, Rocky was meant to be something of a surprise for readers. That's not the case for the film, which has put Rocky front and centre of the marketing campaign. And while the publicity for the film has maybe given a little bit too much away about it, you can see exactly why they did this. Not only does this set the film apart from The Martian, but this relationship is the very heart of the film. Clearly the initial encounters between Grace and Rocky draw a lot of inspiration from Arrival, especially how they interact on a bridge between their two ships, separated by a panel to try and protect each other from their incompatible atmospheres. And just like that movie, they have to try and figure out how to interact with each other and find a common language, at first by mimicry and later through puppet shows. Soon Grace has found a way of translating Rocky's trills and sounds into English, voiced by lead puppeteer James Ortiz, and while Rocky has a bit of a tendency to mix up his words and phrases, they manage to work with each other. And Rocky is a wonderful creation from Star Wars creature designer Neil Scanlon, brought to life through a combination of physical puppets and VFX by Paddington Effects house Framestore. He's distinctly alien, moving and acting like a crab, seen by echolocation, and not even having a face to express himself. As Grace says, faces are overrated. But despite their differences, Grace and Rocky share a lot of common ground, because they're mirror images of each other. Like Grace, Rocky is completely alone, having lost all of his other crew, and he is there for the exact same reason, to save his world. The bond that forms between the pair after their long periods of isolation is genuinely quite moving, especially as they each do what the other can't. Rocky is a skilled engineer, crafting objects out of a metallic form of the gas xenon, and like Grace, you grow to love Rocky even without any humanoid features because he has such visual personality, especially as he rolls around the Hail Mary in a little protective sphere. He's very cute and adorable. Even the repeated image of their ships linked together, spinning in tandem to create gravity on the Hail Mary, serves as a visual metaphor for how they work together. And that the movie manages to get you so emotionally invested in their dynamic is what makes it so heartfelt, particularly in the extended action scenes where they have to risk their lives for each other and for the sake of the mission. You genuinely care for them, and it's a wonderful portrait of friendship that is the film's most unique element. Lord & Miller's direction is particularly strong in the space scenes and the sheer scale and beauty of it. You can tell he took a lot of visual inspiration from the likes of 2001: A Space Odyssey and Silent Running, and the scenes where Grace gets outside in his spacesuit are especially impressive. The shots in space are often played in scientifically correct silence, aside from the film's score, which Lord & Miller even managed to effectively play for an almost Lego movie-esque gag where Grace stutteringly tries to steer the Hail Mary away from Rocky's massive ship in a distant long shot. They've also clearly been inspired by astrophotography, creating a strikingly colourful view of the planets and stars, and it's just an amazing spectacle. You're just overcome by awe. It's particularly apparent in the fishing sequence, but also a scene where Grace has to collect samples of astrophage, and the view snaps into infrared, which is just wondrous and breathtaking in its beauty. As you can tell by all the films I've name-checked over the course of this review, Project Hail Mary is a smorgasbord of pieces taken from other iconic sci-fi movies, but those are some exceptional flicks to be borrowing from, and Project Hail Mary is good enough that it deserves to be mentioned in the same company. While it does sometimes show the strain of trying to condense all of what the book was into feature length, and does feel a little bit overlong, I also don't think there's anything you could really cut from this either, not without severely damaging it in some way. As an adaptation, I think fans of the book will likely be very pleased, but if you're like me and you haven't read it, it's still very accessible. It's a terrific movie that is everything that you go to the cinema for. It's funny, moving, smart, exceptionally acted, and truly spectacular. It's a big, crowd-pleasing blockbuster that is triumphantly optimistic, which is exactly the kind of escapism we need in such gloomy times. I think it may well be an early contender for one of the best films of 2026, or to express that in a way that Rocky would say, Amaze, Amaze, Amaze. If you like this review and you want to support my work, you can give me a tip on my Ko-fi page, or my YouTube Super Thanks feature, which is right below the video. Or you can be the Adrian to my Rocky over at my Patreon, where you can see my videos early among other perks, including access to my Discord server, and you can also join YouTube memberships for similar perks. Or you can just simply like, share and hype the video. It really is appreciated. Until next time, I'm Matthew Burke, fading out.